Welcome to Conversations with Frank Fabozzi. I'm Frank Fabozzi. This series is brought to you by the CFA Institute Research and Policy Center. My guest today is Dr. Iro Tasitsiomi, and I apologize if I butchered your name. She's the head of AI and investments data science research at T. Rowe Price. Previously, she was director and principal data scientist at AI Labs at BlackRock. She holds a PhD in astrophysics and a master's degree in physics from the University of Chicago. Her research in cosmology and dark matter, which needs no further explanation, involved high-level statistical modeling and computational physics, skills that transitioned well into data science and finance. She is known for her ability to translate complex models into practical tools for analysts and portfolio managers, helping bridge the gap between cutting edge AI and real world finance. That's a very unique skill if you know how, if you realize how it's difficult to communicate these technical concepts to portfolio managers who could be very skilled but not necessarily familiar with the concepts in artificial intelligence. Welcome, Iro.
Thank you so much. Thank you. And you did great with my name.
Thank you. You have an academic background in physics and astrophysics, as I just explained. How has that influenced your perspective on building models and solving problems in financial markets?
Well, it has profoundly influenced the way I go about this, but frankly, more generally, the way I think around problem solving, in particular physics, I think, from all other domains and subjects, I think it encourages the development of abstraction and generalization. Um, I often still find myself connecting things that people think they are seemingly irrelevant or disconnected. But that skill is something that I think I developed during my physics work. And actually, that is very important when indeed you're trying to go from a domain to another, right? The way I did in finance. So I think that helped me very, very much. Another thing that I think it's more like an academia thing, and I was actually at a conference last week, and academics kept mentioning that, is that, the means are not abundant, right? In academia, you really have to focus on delivering value with minimal means. So trying to make the most out of the things you have available, the resources you have available. And like, for example, OpenAI, right, where you have so much money to spend. So being able to get this economical, lowest energy, maximum entropy kind of approach actually has come both from physics and academia more generally. And last but not least, I don't know if it's the chicken or the egg, but having been through or being through academia means that you're extremely curious, or it makes you also even more curious, as well as skeptical. One thing that is very important is that I see scientists or people with scientific background and academic background are not phenomenologists. They don't just accept something because it works. That's not good enough.
Well, what prompted you move from research in the physical sciences to leading AI initiatives at investment firms like BlackRock and now T. Rowe Price? And didn't you teach before you made the move
Yes.
to that
Yes.
Cornell University?
I did my PhD at the University of Chicago, and then I was at Princeton. And while I was there, actually, the story goes, a book written by Emmanuel Derman with title My Life as a Quant made it on my desk. And Emmanuel Derman is a very well-known, used to be physicist who actually moved into finance. I want to say sometime in the 80s at Goldman Sachs, and he had a stellar career. There are even interest rate models named after him, the Black Derman toy model. So I read all that, and completely, new thing became available to me. I was like, huh. So I was intrigued. So I decided to give it a try. So naturally, I didn't go directly to AI at the time. So I became a quant, right? A finance quant, initially at Goldman Sachs. And as more data started becoming available and computing became cheaper and cheaper and data science became a thing, naturally, what we used to refer to as finance quants now expanded and became data scientists. And in time, again, this included, algorithms and solutions that fall under the AI umbrella. And in more recent times, naturally, we started looking also into, okay, what can AI do more compared to more traditional methods? So it was kind of a journey for sure. It didn't happen overnight, but it was extremely enriching and interesting.
As head of AI and investments data science research at T. Rowe Price, how do you define your strategic priorities in applying AI to investment challenges?
That's a great question. Often people consider that a tough one. I find that an easy one. So, first is value, uh, maximize value and impact. So, all you have to do is have a consistent system, collaborate with your business partners, sit down and identify where you can maximize value deliver. And then the second kind of dimension is alignment. Alignment both with the investment philosophy and the culture of the institution. It's different if you are in an active asset manager or a passive, if you're in a systematic shop versus discretionary. So, alignment with this philosophy, as well as the corporate strategy, right? At the end of the day, you are part of a business, and the idea is to help the business achieve its corporate objectives ultimately.
Now, I hope I'm not asking you to do something that may may be a problem in disclosing, but can you share an example of a machine learning or NLP application at T. Rowe Price that has actually delivered tangible benefits?
Yeah. And, it doesn't have to be specific to any firm. I think we all have realized the enormous value that natural language processing can deliver. And why is that? Because once upon a time, numbers was the only thing we could munch, right? Models with numbers. As soon as natural language processing tools started to become available, you can see now that the majority of information, which is in this unstructured shape and form, now becomes available to us. So, in a programmatic way, right? So now you can consume enormous amounts of information, and that can help you with anything from topic tracking, trend setting, thematic investing. How would it be even possible to identify companies in South Korea that has a very niche exposure to a theme you're interested? The way to do is to start reading what's written about them and from them, but you just cannot do it if you're a human. So anything from thematic investing to speech attributes, sentiment is a very well-known example, to topic tracking, all those things are available and extremely valuable through natural language processing. So it's a whole array of use cases.
Well, how do you decide whether to apply traditional quantitative methods versus modern AI tools when approaching a new investment problem?
That's a great question. Well, first, it starts with what is it that you're trying to model, right? Is it a well defined problem that kind of fits within some kind of a finance framework or economics framework? Or is it something that needs a little bit more, I don't know, experimentation? Then it has also to do with what kind of data you have available and what data you need. So clearly, if you're going to go the AI machine learning route, the expectation is that you have a lot of high quality data. If that's not the case, even if you thought that the problem is best addressed with machine learning, you won't be able to really do anything meaningful. Also, in general, again, going back to my scientific background, I do value parsimony. As Einstein said, we need to be making things as simple as possible, not simpler. We are not supposed to lose and miss the nuances, but we should not be taking the bazooka and trying, to kill every little fly with the most complicated of problems. That comes with cost and risk. Last but not least, even though typically machine learning and AI are models that are more complex, there are still occasions that they are unique, right? For example, if we are interested in capturing nonlinearities, or we don't have numerical data as we were discussing, or we are interested in unsupervised machine learning, which is something that you don't even have a question to ask. You just want the model to tell you things. So there are plenty of occasions where machine learning is really best suited. Again, with the, keeping in mind that it also needs a lot more data and quality. So it's not always the cheapest or the easier to understand solution. But a combination of these criteria, what it is we're trying to do and what data is available, will determine traditional versus ML or AI.
Well, interpretability is often a concern with AI models. How do you balance the trade off between performance and transparency and model deployment? And before doing that, it might be helpful to those who are not that familiar with AI to explain what interpretability is.
Yes. Well, there is interpretability and explainability, but I'm not going to give us a headache with semantics. But when it comes to a model, there are two distinct things one may want to do. One is to explain how the model works, right? So, well, before I see any results, I may have a random forest. So imagine like a bunch of trees with potential if-then, outcomes. One thing is, can I tell you in advance, like how this thing works? And then the other part is, okay, it does what it does, it's deep learning or whatever. When I get a result, can I understand where is it coming from? Why did it provide this kind of result? Either way, interpretability or explainability, I'm not even a native speaker, so I'm gonna stop there. The idea is understanding, right? Understanding across from beginning to end why we get what we get. Now, we are in a highly regulated industry, so it goes without saying that we cannot just adopt black boxes, right? But even if we were in a highly regulated industry, it stands to reason that if you do not understand a model and why it produces what it does, the odds of you anticipating when it will stop working are very low. And that is a very big risk. So I personally think that understandability, let's say, interpretability, explainability are still central and should continue to be central. And that's why I'm also advocating for parsimony. Do not make something more complex than it needs to be, right? That said, there may be, depending on the utility function of each institution, some capacity to take a little bit of risk and try with a little bit of complexity, in which case, going back to how do you balance performance with transparency, I would suggest that people make sure they poke the model. So even if you don't understand everything, trying to understand what behaviors it could exhibit, maybe you don't know why, but still it's important to document how it may behave under circumstances that are not your normal circumstances. Imagine the Gaussian copula, right? Where, people would actually use it to model correlated events, but it turns out they've never looked into what is happening with correlated events when they are extreme. So poking a model to tell you all those things so that you know them is the way to say, okay, I don't understand completely how you work, but I know what to expect. There are potential outcomes of that nature.
Thank you. What are the biggest hurdles you face when integrating AI models into investment workflows?
Mm-hmm. I mean, often people, going to the technical front with this question like, oh, legacy system, this and that. But I think the most important, and I wouldn't call it a hurdle, but kind of like the most interesting challenge around bringing these cutting edge tools to institutions that have been around for a long time is making people feel comfortable with them and finding a meaningful way to include them in their workflow. So basically, I'm talking about adoption, but adoption in a way that is, again, going back to aligns with the investment philosophy, right? So, for example, when you're in the fundamental shop, the idea is not replacement, right? The idea is augmentation. So, finding and understanding an organization's culture and finding how these models now can optimally be used I think it's the most interesting challenge.
Well, how important is domain knowledge in finance for someone working on AI models in asset management?
Ah, extremely. It is the way to get credible. It's really hard to imagine, no matter how much technical one can be, that you can actually optimally communicate with a PM, an analyst, right? If you don't speak the same language. I genuinely think that that's the way to have maximum impact if you are a data scientist. I never took the more engineer approach where, you are a person that has certain technical skills. Again, there's going to be a ton lost in translation if you don't speak the language. And most importantly, going back to adoption, it is around credibility. People feel comfortable when you talk, you speak their language, and when you share their concerns and interests. So I think it is imperative if somebody wants to really have impact in finance.
What technical and analytical skills do you consider most essential for students or early career professionals who aspire to have a role like yours?
So a couple of things, definitely math and stats and all the things like even numerical analysis that I don't know if we use anymore, but like any type of math, it's gonna at some point in your career, you will say, oh, great that I happen to understand or know that. That's a good tool. So do not take an engineering approach in data science. You are not coders. This is the means and not just the means to an end. I appreciate the value of a good piece of code being written, production level, but importing libraries, especially nowadays with ChatGPT being able to write any piece of code you ask, has nothing to do with the science piece. The idea is, do you understand how these tools work, how the algorithms, what assumptions they are making? Do you understand your data? Do you look at those critically? So a lot of stats, a lot of math, a lot of curiosity. And as an attribute, not that much a skill, never assume you understand something. I had a conversation yesterday with my team, and we were discussing private markets. And there is a newer version, let's say, of CAPM, the popularity asset pricing management framework that I attended a talk on. And you could see that people couldn't make the connection. They would say, well, that's private. Why would we apply something like that? I'm like, well, for sure. The difference is that you don't have as much information. But other than that, when you're thinking about values, how could that be different? So many times we don't think deeply about things, we just think we know. So I would encourage people to delve into real depth when it comes to understanding the things that they're doing and they're using.
What's your take on large language models like ChatGPT and their potential use in both investment research or operations?
I think that they can provide an enormous lift. I have so many examples, but yesterday, I was looking into index reconstitution, and I literally modeled with ChatGPT in a couple of hours the effect of the fact that an index vendor, right? Let's say Tesla will be added to S&P 500. About 10 days before that, they make an announcement. And then I said, okay, let's assume that I have market participants that start buying a little bit in anticipation of passive asset managers needing a lot of Tesla 10 days from today because they will need to change the composition of their portfolio since they're following the index. Anyway, long story short, you can have like whole game theory models developed in collaboration in literally an hour or two. And you can actually also say, I want it in LaTeX. So you put it there and you have a paper in like 4 hours. It's just mind blowing. So extremely valuable. That said, I always want to make the distinction that they are extremely powerful, but also dumb from the standpoint of they are very brute force trained. I think we can do better, in other words, with all the resources and the training, the compute we have put in. I think we can do better. That said, as a end user, I'll take it as long as I don't have to assume the cost of this enormous training. Very powerful, though.
Okay, well, looking ahead, what developments in AI do you think will most transform asset managers' operations over the next few years?
The thing that we all talk a lot about, and it's going to be interesting to see how it evolves, is the so called hyper customization or hyper personalization. I'm eager to see what this would mean. Like, would it be that my mother in Greece will have a way to communicate to a machine her needs and then get something extremely tailored that actually can execute as well? I mean, I really don't. I mean, I'm eager to see how. I'm pretty sure I cannot imagine how customizable things will become. So eager to see that, and eager to see where the more productivity gain thing will go. Because again, if already I can write a well, I can really I need more time to write a paper, but when you can like work out the main math of a model in a couple of hours, I cannot imagine what the future will be like. Imagine when AI will be kind of integrated in the physical world, right? So, very eager to see how that would look like.
Now, what when you were on the academic side, what type of articles did you write? I know you've published a few articles. I don't know if you have a patent or not, but
I
in a
have a
non-technical way, describe some of the work that you've done.
Sure. So, I kind of follow two distinct kind of paths that relate to each other. They're both within the context of cosmology. So, cosmology is the branch of astrophysics that is looking into how the universe came to be the way it is. So I did lots of work on so-called large-scale structure formation. What does this mean? It means trying to understand what led to the clusters of galaxies we have, to the galaxies we have, to the smaller structures within galaxies. So when we say large-scale structure formation, we literally mean how did these blobs of matter came to be together. The way you do that in cosmology is that you assume a certain underlying stochastic process that gives rise to these things, right? And then after you let the universe evolve, so the beginning was very small perturbations, small over densities, not big, but as you know, with gravity, the dense gets denser. So now you start having the collapse. So the initial perturbation, the power spectrum, is your assumed theory. So that's an input. You're saying, I believe that my universe is XYZ. It has a mathematical expression. You make that a realization of that field of perturbations in a simulation box. So that's the initial conditions. And then you solve in that box the equations, including that of gravity, right? And then at the end, you look and you say, okay, does this piece of universe look like the real universe? Now, how do you compare universes? The way to do it is again statistical. You go into the simulation box and you count objects as a function of how big they are. 3 halos of mass 10 to the 15 solar masses, and then 2 halos of that. And depending on how it compares to what people have seen, you can infer whether your initial assumption, the model you started with for the perturbations, whether it is wrong or not. As I always say, you can never prove something right. But if your final screenshot of your simulation box is unlike the real world, you can confidently say the initial thing was not the right thing. If it is compatible, then you are looking for additional predictions that the model makes to see whether you find them out there. So that is kind of the second piece where I looked into dark matter candidates. For example, we know that there is dark matter. In many indirect ways, we can infer its existence. For example, when you look at a cluster of galaxies, galaxies move faster than you would assume given the luminous part. So you say, there has to be more matter in there that I cannot see. So that is one way that we know there is more material than what we see, hence dark matter. But we don't know beyond that. We don't know what it is. So the other part of my research, in addition to large-scale structural formation, cosmological simulations, was looking into potential candidates for what dark matter would be. So I worked a lot on supersymmetric particles as potential candidates for dark matter. And once again, the idea was, if indeed, say, dark matter is neutralinous, what other things should I expect? Like, would there be any gamma rays that I should expect because of annihilation? La, la, la. So I guess, yeah, I think more or less that's it. But I've also done radiative transfer for Lyman alpha emitters. I've done quite a few different things. And to be honest, I actually had two advisors also. So I kept them busy.
Yeah, I mentioned where you got your master's degree and your PhD, but my recollection when I did some research, we don't talk about your undergraduate degree. You got your undergraduate degree in Europe,
Yes.
and you then applied. It's very difficult to get into the University of Chicago, period. To get into the physics area, you must have been trained well, but I guess, English wasn't your native language. So I assume, what did you go to, the Aristotle Institute or something like that?
Yes, Aristotle University. So
Yeah.
that,
Tell us a little bit about how you got to Chicago.
oh
And
God,
I
yes.
don't mean by plane. I know that. But
I didn't swim. Okay. Yes, it's a whole process. I mean, first I had to take the GRE, the graduate record examinations, both the general, consisting of verbal, speaking of language, as well as analytical and quantitative sections, and then the physics GRE. Needless to say, the experience was very foreign to me because, for example, like even the multiple choice tests that are so frequent here in the US, even that I have never taken before, right? So even knowing or having kind of a strategy of how to take such a test is a new thing. Now, when it comes to the language part, luckily, people were lenient. They never paid attention to the verbal section of GRE because this is usually like the place where you hear words like panacea, right? Which I happen to know because it's Greek, but often Greek origin words, we don't use them the way we use them in Greece. So that could be confusing. So anyway, from the verbal, luckily, I don't know, I got maybe 400 out of 800, but they didn't care because there is another examination, the test of English as a foreign language, TOEFL, that is more, working everyday English, that I took the exam, passed really, scored really high. But overall, yes, it was not an easy process. Even finding books, like what are you supposed to read to prepare for the subject in physics? That said, as I think I had mentioned to you, Frank, Aristotle had prepared me really well because it was not college education per se, it was specialization. It was 45 classes of physics and math. So I did anything from optics and holography in optics laboratories to solid state matter physics to X-ray laboratories to circuits and transistors, semiconductors, not just, astrophysics, right? So that was something that I got to appreciate later when I came and I'm like, I really learned a lot of good physics there. And I love it. I still love physics. I'm still fascinated, probably more than I used to be. I really think it's been a great field to study.
Okay, last question. You have an opening on your team for a junior analyst. What do you look for in hiring that individual?
Again, somebody who asks questions, I know that's a cultural thing and you can help people get out of their shell by encouraging them, but there is something to be said that you really have to also know that you're not going to learn without asking. I still ask silly questions and I have no shame whatsoever. So somebody who knows that the way to learn is to ask, somebody who has this fire, and usually the fire is shown by what they do in the free time, like I mean, I didn't have to do the reconstitution index thing yesterday, but I was so fascinated I wanted to. So usually people that will have examples of things that they didn't really have to do, but because they're interested, they ended up doing. So this is a good sign. And of course, as we were saying, right, definitely some kind of skills, technical experiences on the math front, statistics, etc. I don't really care much about whether you really know AI. I mean, you're going to learn AI. That's not, it's algorithms, right? But having the right background to be able to understand, I don't know, what representation sampling means, it's important. I'd say that. And then, as we also discussed in the past, um, it is imperative, especially nowadays, to be able to spend time and make stories so that you communicate to people. We do not live in a vacuum. We need to constantly be talking to people that are not as technical as we are. And we need to do that in an impactful way. So, in general, people that, are not ready to open to the world too much, it's probably going to be a big disadvantage. So I'm not crazy social either, but I love talking about the things I work on. And that itself leads you to the whole exercise of like making your story. How will you explain something to somebody, et cetera, et cetera. So having an interest to work on that for sure, it's an attribute.
Well, thank you very much. If you have any comments you'd like to make beyond the questions I've asked?
No, thank you. That was, as always, a blast. Thank you for having me.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you for taking the time to do this. I'm sure everyone has gained great insights from our interview. Thank you
I
very
hope so.
much.
Thank you.
Wow.